There are mysteries that history wants to bury. There were once civilizations that left the entire world in awe. Yet today their names have vanished from every written page. Ancient manuscripts burned in the shadows. Libraries that once held knowledge far ahead of their time, now reduced to ashes, and books banned not because they were wrong, but because they contain truths too dangerous for the world to know. Today, on this journey with Bedtime History, we will step through the tightly locked doors of the past to uncover the civilizations hidden within forbidden books, a journey through conspiracies, power plays, and secrets that perhaps no one has dared to tell you until now. When it comes to forgotten civilizations, perhaps no name is more controversial or more haunting than Atlantis. Was it a city, an empire, or simply a philosophical metaphor? The debate has raged on for more than 2,000 years. Yet what few people realize is this: the story of Atlantis itself was once placed on the list of forbidden knowledge in Europe for centuries. Not because of the story's content alone, but because of its deeper implications, ones that could shake the very foundations of Western historical understanding. The origins of Atlantis trace back to two dialogues written by Plato, Timaeus and Critias, composed around 360 BCE. In these works, Plato recounts a tale passed down through his ancestors, originally told by the philosopher Solon after a journey to Egypt. Egyptian priests revealed that some 9,000 years before Plato's time, there had existed a vast continent beyond the Pillars of Hercules, today known as the Strait of Gibraltar, home to a rich and powerful civilization that surpassed all others. Atlantis was said to possess a mighty naval fleet, magnificent palaces, intricate canals, and technological marvels that astonished the ancient world. But out of greed and arrogance, the Atlanteans dared to challenge the gods, and in a single fateful night, violent earthquakes and tsunamis dragged the entire continent beneath the sea. So, why would such a story be banned? To answer this, we must understand the context of medieval Europe. While Plato himself used Atlantis as a philosophical illustration of societal decline, later scholars began to wonder, what if it wasn't just a metaphor? What if Atlantis had truly existed as a prehistoric civilization more advanced than even Greece or Rome? That possibility made any writing on Atlantis highly sensitive. In an era when the Catholic Church controlled intellectual thought, the idea of a civilization predating the biblical timeline was unacceptable. According to the doctrine of creation, human history spanned only a few thousand years, beginning with Adam and Eve, a mighty empire existing 9,000 years before Plato shattered that framework, posing a dangerous threat to religious teachings. And so, from the 12th century onward, translations and commentaries on Timaeus and Critias that mentioned Atlantis were strictly censored. In Italy and Spain, several publishers who printed works about Atlantis were suppressed by church authorities. Certain manuscripts in the Vatican Library contain clear notes, De Atlantis non licet disserere. It is not permitted to discuss Atlantis. During the Renaissance, as new ideas began to stir, secret maps once again sparked interest in the lost continent. The famed cartographer Gerhard Mercator included cryptic notes on his maps of Europe referring to a lost land in the Atlantic. Abraham Ortelius, the father of modern cartography, wrote similar annotations about vanished continents he believed once existed. But perhaps the most shocking evidence came from a different source, the Piri-Reis map of 1513. This Ottoman map, drawn on gazelle skin, depicted the coastline of South America, and even southern regions that Europeans had not yet explored. Astonishingly, the portion of Antarctica shown on the Piri-Reis map displays an ice-free coastline, a condition that would only have existed thousands of years ago during a warm period. Some alternative scholars argue that this map was based on sources far older, possibly even from the time of Atlantis. Adding to the mystery, many folk legends from the Azores, the Canary Islands, and even the Americas speak of a great land that once sank beneath the sea. In the Bahamas, local traditions still tell of the Beach of the Gods, where ancient ruins sometimes emerge when the tides recede. And here is the question: why does a legend like Atlantis endure with such strength, spreading across so many cultures that had no direct contact with Greek thought? Could it be that the memory of a lost civilization is somehow preserved within the collective subconscious of humanity? Today, archaeologists continue to discover curious structures on the Atlantic seafloor, from the Bimini Road to regions off the coast of Spain, lending further intrigue to the Atlantis hypothesis. Mainstream science remains skeptical, yet these findings are enough to provoke new questions. Were the forbidden books of the past hiding truths that we are not yet ready to confront? And if the existence of Atlantis was so carefully suppressed, how many other civilizations have been erased from official history simply because their reality threatened established worldviews? The answer may lead us down paths more surprising than we can imagine in the journey yet to come. But if Atlantis has become a global symbol, from philosophy to pop culture, then Lemuria remains a story far fewer people know. Its name is often whispered only within small academic circles or in obscure manuscripts few have ever touched. And perhaps for that very reason, the details of Lemuria are even more easily forgotten, or worse, deliberately erased from the official flow of history. What's fascinating is that the concept of Lemuria didn't begin as a myth, but as a question of biology. In the mid-19th century, naturalists faced a strange paradox. Lemurs, a species native to Madagascar, had fossil relatives found in both Africa and India, yet were completely absent from the regions in between, such as East Africa. To explain this, British zoologist Philip Sclater proposed a bold hypothesis in an 1864 article in the Quarterly Journal of Science, that a vast landmass, which he called Lemuria, had once connected Madagascar and India across the Indian Ocean, providing a bridge for these species before the continent sank beneath the sea. Though initially a geological theory, later dismissed by the modern theory of plate tectonics, the name Lemuria soon caught the imagination of the occult world. By the late 19th century, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, founder of the Theosophical Society, drew inspiration from it to craft a much broader doctrine. She claimed that Lemuria was not merely an ancient continent, but had been home to an extraordinarily advanced prehistoric civilization dating back more than 50,000 years, long before accepted civilizations like Sumer or ancient Egypt. According to Blavatsky, the Lemurians were a race of giants with highly developed spiritual powers, possessing knowledge of energy, architecture, and the cosmos far beyond modern understanding. She cited Eastern manuscripts, particularly from Tibetan monasteries, as her sources. This made her writings, especially The Secret Doctrine, 1888, a prime target for censorship campaigns. In late 19th century Europe, as the occult movement surged, many conservative Christian nations such as France, Spain, and Portugal placed Blavatsky's works on banned book lists. The reason wasn't just the mystical content, but the fact that her doctrines indirectly challenged the biblical model of creation by referencing pre-Adamite races and civilizations, those that supposedly existed before Adam in the Bible. Notably, many ancient Eastern manuscripts that Blavatsky cited also contain echoes of a lost land. In South India, ancient Tamil texts speak of Kumari Kandam, a vast continent once linking southern India with Madagascar and Australia, now swallowed by the sea. Tamil epics such as Silapatikaram and Manimekalai tell of ancient kingdoms lost beneath the waves, along with faded memories of sophisticated sciences. Some modern scholars suggest that Kumari Kandam and Lemuria may simply be two names for the same myth, or perhaps two cultural reflections of an actual historical reality long distorted by time. This possibility grew more intriguing in recent decades as surveys of the Indian Ocean seafloor revealed unexpected geological formations. In 2013, a team of Indian geologists discovered granite blocks deep beneath ocean sediments near the Seychelles, granite being a rock that forms on land, not on the ocean floor. This suggests that fragments of an ancient continental mass may indeed lie submerged there, remnants of a land torn apart by tectonic shifts. Off the coast of Tamil Nadu, near Mahabalipuram, divers have also discovered stone structures believed to be the ruins of ancient temples, submerged after a massive tsunami. Local legends have long told of the 7 pagodas, of which only one remains above water today, while the other 6 are said to have vanished beneath the sea. So, could Lemuria truly have existed as a vast continent? And if so, just how advanced was its civilization that later powers might have deliberately tried to erase it from human memory? A provocative theory was proposed in the early 20th century by researcher William Scott Elliott. Drawing on Theosophical Society materials, he suggested that Lemuria had once been the birthplace of knowledge later partially inherited by ancient civilizations like Egypt and India. If such knowledge were ever fully acknowledged, it would force us to rewrite all of human history, recognizing that many achievements we credit to so-called enlightened civilizations like Greece and Rome may in fact be mere shadows of what came before. Perhaps for this very reason, deeper manuscripts about Lemuria were never widely circulated. In fact, within the Vatican's archives, according to researchers like Father Malachi Martin, who once had access, there are said to be translations of Eastern texts describing a continent of the gods. But these translations lie deep within restricted rooms of the archive, where very few are permitted to enter. Lemuria, like Atlantis, still lingers at the blurred edge of legend and history. But as more geological and archaeological evidence comes to light, perhaps one day this once banned name will be restored to the official pages of human history. And if Lemuria truly did exist, we must ask, how many other civilizations whose legacy once shaped this planet have been deliberately erased from our collective memory? The answer will continue to guide us on this journey into the deepest hidden secrets of history. After the waves of speculation about Atlantis and Lemuria had begun to settle, yet another name, even more obscure, with even fewer traces of evidence, emerged from the hidden corners of forbidden manuscripts. Mu. Not everyone has heard of this name, and fewer still dare to question its existence. For among all the lost civilizations, Mu is perhaps the one most aggressively denied, not only by mainstream academia, but also by the forces that control access to knowledge. The story of Mu begins in the late 19th century when French explorer and researcher Auguste Le Plongeon, while studying ancient Mayan inscriptions in Yucatan, Mexico, claimed to have translated symbols that spoke of a lost continent called Mu. According to him, Mu had once stood at the heart of the Pacific Ocean, the cradle of a great civilization tens of thousands of years ago. Le Plongeon believed that the Maya were the descendants of refugees from Mu after the continent was destroyed by catastrophic geological upheavals. He published his findings in a series of articles and books, but instead of being welcomed, his work was mocked by European and American scholars, excluded from prestigious libraries, and in some cases even banned from university curricula. But the story did not end there. In the early 20th century, British Army officer and researcher James Churchward, while stationed in India, was granted access by a senior monk from a secret order to a set of ancient tablets, what he called the Knuckle tablets. According to Churchward, these tablets contained records from a super-advanced civilization that once flourished on the continent of Mu, a vast landmass in the middle of the Pacific, spanning millions of square kilometers, connecting Asia to the Americas through chains of islands. Churchward claimed that the civilization of Mu had reached heights of science, art, and spirituality unmatched by any that followed. The people of Mu, he said, understood the cosmic laws of energy, built massive structures without mechanical tools, and developed a universal language and body of knowledge, fragments of which were later inherited by ancient civilizations such as Egypt, Mesopotamia, and India. Churchward went on to publish a series of books about Mu, beginning with The Lost Continent of Mu in 1926. But in a familiar pattern seen with Atlantis and Lemuria, his work was swiftly attacked by the academic establishment. Scholarly bodies in both Britain and the US issued recommendations that Churchward's books be excluded from curricula and libraries. Some European publishers even refused to distribute his works after facing pressure from groups linked to the Church. The reasons were not purely scientific skepticism. A deeper concern lay beneath. If Mu had truly existed, then the entire narrative of human migration and the development of civilizations across Asia, the Americas, and Oceania would have to be rewritten. Trans-Pacific connections, long denied by traditional migration theories, would need to be acknowledged. This posed a threat to many long-held theories of social evolution and the political narratives attached to them. What made the story of Mu even more intriguing was the appearance of unexpected evidence. From the giant stone statues of Polynesia on Easter Island, which Churchward identified as remnants of Mu, to architectural and linguistic patterns showing startling similarities between cultures separated by thousands of kilometers across the Pacific. For example, researchers such as Thor Heyerdahl pointed out remarkable parallels in boat-building techniques and artistic traditions between Polynesians and South American cultures, similarities too specific to dismiss as coincidence. Moreover, linguistic studies have revealed surprising connections between the languages of Pacific Island groups and ancient tongues of Asia. One question often arises: how did the Polynesians, who lacked large ship technology, manage to migrate across such vast ocean distances between small Pacific islands? Could they have been the descendants of much older, more advanced seafaring civilizations? Further adding to the mystery, off the coast of Japan's Yonaguni Island, divers have discovered massive stone structures beneath the sea, terraces, columns, and walls that appear to have been shaped by human hands. While mainstream archaeologists argue these may be natural formations, many independent researchers believe they are the remains of a prehistoric civilization, possibly linked to Mu. So why has Mu been so forcefully erased from historical discourse? One likely reason is that its existence undermines the narrative of Western-centric history, one that places Europe at the pinnacle of intellectual development. Acknowledging the possibility of a highly advanced prehistoric civilization in the Asia-Pacific would erode the primacy of Western historical claims. Yet despite the opposition, Mu continues to live on in the oral traditions of many Pacific peoples. The Hawaiians tell of Kanehunamoku, a land of the gods now swallowed by the sea. The Maori speak of Hawaiki, an ancient homeland their ancestors left in search of new lands. Whether these are literal histories or symbolic echoes, they leave tantalizing traces of something that once was. Today, advances in oceanography, underwater archaeology, and studies of prehistoric sea level changes continue to yield new clues. With every ancient structure discovered beneath the waves, the question of Mu rises once more. Perhaps Mu is nothing more than an illusion. But perhaps it is the missing piece in humanity's story, one that certain powers have fought to conceal for over a century. And if Mu did indeed exist, then we have only begun to scratch the surface of an ancient global network of civilizations, one that, when fully revealed, could forever change how we understand ourselves. If Atlantis was a golden city buried beneath the Atlantic, and Lemuria and Mu were lost continents beneath vast oceans, then Hyperborea, the next mysterious name on our journey, is tied to the far north, a land where the sun never sets, and where ancient knowledge is said to still flow, quietly, through the hidden veins of history. For centuries, Hyperborea has existed at the blurred edge between myth and history, dismissed as fantasy by official accounts, yet strangely persistent across many cultures. What makes it even more remarkable is that this name did not appear in just one tradition, but echoed through multiple civilizations, from ancient Greece to Norse legends, and even within mystical manuscripts carefully hidden away for centuries. The origins of the name Hyperborea can be traced back to the writings of Herodotus, Pindar, and especially the poetry and epic tales of ancient Greece. According to these accounts, Hyperborea was a land far to the north, beyond the lands of the Scythians, where the Hyperboreans lived in eternal peace. There, the sun shone both day and night during the summer months. The land was lush. People lived long lives and knew neither war nor disease. At first, scholars viewed this as a symbol, an ideal land in the Greek imagination. But over time, as ancient maps were rediscovered, researchers noticed that many medieval and Renaissance cartographers had depicted Hyperborea as an actual geographic location. Gerardus Mercator's famous 1569 map clearly shows 4 islands surrounding a massive whirlpool at the North Pole, labelled as Terra Hyperborea. The story didn't stop there. In the 17th and 18th century Europe, theologians and mystics began to reference Hyperborea with deeper and more unsettling implications. In certain manuscripts listed among the Vatican's forbidden texts, Hyperborea was described as the cradle of a prehistoric civilization that once exerted vast influence across Eurasian cultures. According to these sources, the Hyperboreans possessed not only advanced knowledge of astronomy and geography, but also an understanding of spiritual energies and cosmic laws that we are only beginning to grasp today. One of the most controversial works on the subject is Arctos, the Polar Myth, by Jocelyn Godwin. Drawing from ancient documents, Godwin argued that belief in a Hyperborean civilization once spread widely through Europe's secret societies, from the Rosicrucians to the Freemasons and other esoteric movements. For this reason, books discussing Hyperborea were once tightly censored within European libraries. What makes political and academic circles uneasy about Hyperborea is not simply its mystical nature. The problem lies deeper. If a civilization once thrived in the far north, one highly advanced in prehistoric times, then the linear model of human progress, rising solely from southern cultures, begins to fall apart. Hyperborea suggests that a parallel branch of human development, perhaps even more advanced, may once have existed and been forgotten. Another factor adding to the sensitivity is Hyperborea's entanglement with dangerous racial and ideological theories in the 20th century. Unorthodox scholars such as Guido von List and certain German mystical groups once claimed Hyperborea as the original homeland of the Aryan race, a claim that later fueled highly politicized extremist ideologies. After World War II, many studies on Hyperborea were either banned or classified as sensitive, not purely for academic reasons, but because of their potential to incite extremism. Yet if we strip away these ideological layers, the traces of Hyperborea remain deeply compelling. Norse mythology, from the tales of Asgard to the wisdom of the Sami peoples of the Arctic, speaks of lands in the far north that were once centers of knowledge and power. In Norse legend, Asgard, home of the gods, is described as a polar realm, connected to the cosmos by the great tree Yggdrasil. Modern researchers have sought geographical evidence for Hyperborea. Studies of ancient Arctic sediments reveal that the polar regions once experienced far warmer climates during prehistoric periods, supporting forests and animal life unimaginable in today's frozen environment. This raises the question, was there once a time when the far north could have supported human life, and perhaps even a civilization? Further, archaeological discoveries in Russia's Kola Peninsula, where mysterious ancient stone structures aligned with astronomical patterns have been found, suggest that memories of Hyperborea may not be entirely fictional. Yet perhaps the deepest reason why Hyperborea was pushed out of official history lies elsewhere. It symbolizes a civilization not built upon material power or domination, but upon knowledge and harmony with nature. A social model that in the modern world is often seen as impractical and even dangerous because it challenges existing structures of authority. And so Hyperborea continues to flow quietly beneath the surface, through ancient manuscripts, secret societies, and whispered legends. Part of its truth may still be hidden. But the light of Hyperborea, a land where knowledge and spiritual wisdom reigned, quietly awaits the day it may once again be revealed. The story of lost civilizations is not confined to Greek legends or ancient European maps. In the East, too, faint memories endure of brilliant lands swallowed by the sea. One of the most mysterious of these is the legend of Kumari Kandam, a magnificent continent said to have once connected southern India with Madagascar, stretching all the way toward Australia. And like Atlantis, Lemuria, or Hyperborea, the name Kumari Kandam has long been dismissed as superstition, with many documents about it banned or censored for centuries. What makes Kumari Kandam particularly fascinating is that its story was not imagined by Western scholars. It comes directly from the epics, ancient manuscripts, and oral traditions of the Tamil people, one of the world's oldest and most continuous cultures. In Silapatikaram and Manimekalai, two famous Tamil epics dating back to the first millennium CE, detailed accounts describe a vast land to the south of India that now lies beneath the ocean. According to ancient Tamil texts, Kumari Kandam was once the heart of ancient Tamil civilization, a center of knowledge, art, language, and philosophy at its peak. Tamil tradition holds that 3 Tamil literary assemblies, known as Sangams, were once hosted in this land for thousands of years. According to legend, 2 of these 3 Sangams were lost when the sea rose and engulfed the land. During the 19th and 20th centuries, Tamil scholars such as U.V. Swaminatha Iyer and Maraimalai Adigal devoted years to reconstructing ancient texts that referenced Kumari Kandam. But during British colonial rule, references to Kumari Kandam were suppressed in academic circles because colonial authorities sought to discourage the idea that a great South Indian civilization might have once flourished, perhaps even predating the northern Aryan cultures. The notion of an ancient Tamil civilization with deep influence would have undermined colonial narratives designed to legitimize foreign rule. In the 20th century, as the Tamil cultural renaissance gained momentum, Tamil activists and intellectuals began to reclaim Kumari Kandam as an essential part of their identity. But they soon faced resistance, not only from Indian mainstream historians, but also from Western academics. Some scholarly papers on Kumari Kandam were rejected by international journals on the grounds that they lacked scientific basis, even as archaeological and geological evidence increasingly supported the possibility of such a land. One line of evidence comes from studies of ancient sea levels. geologists surveying the continental shelf off Tamil Nadu have found traces of ancient river channels and submerged plains now lying beneath the sea. Bathymetric maps reveal land areas that once stood above water but now lie hundreds of meters beneath the ocean. A study by India's National Institute of Oceanography indicates that sea levels rose by about 100 meters after the last ice age, enough to submerge vast coastal regions. Further support comes from archaeological finds at Mahabalipuram, which align with ancient legends of sunken temples. According to local tradition, the ancient city of Mahabalipuram once boasted 7 magnificent temples, of which only one remains above ground today. In 2004, when the Indian Ocean tsunami struck, the receding waters temporarily revealed massive submerged stone structures, just as ancient stories had described. A subsequent survey by the Archaeological Survey of India confirmed the presence of man-made structures beneath the sea. In linguistic studies, scholars like Kamil Zvelebil have pointed out that Tamil contains many ancient maritime terms that may stem from a deeper seafaring culture we do not yet fully understand. Certain words related to navigation, fishing, and the sea have roots that suggest the Tamil people had a maritime tradition going back thousands of years, consistent with the idea of a prehistoric island civilization. What makes Kumari Kandam dangerous in the eyes of those who seek to control historical narratives is not simply the possibility that a lost land once existed, but the deeper implications. If ancient Tamil civilization had once centered in a great, advanced land, then the entire theory of Aryan invasion bringing civilization to India would need to be reconsidered, and this could fundamentally reshape how Indians view their own history, something neither colonial rulers nor conservative forces have wanted. To this day, mainstream academia remains cautious about Kumari Kandam. Even as archaeological and geological evidence grows, the term Kumari Kandam rarely appears in official scholarly works. Serious research papers on the topic often use more neutral phrases such as ancient Tamil maritime civilization to avoid being labeled unscientific. Yet in the collective memory of millions of Tamil people, Kumari Kandam remains vivid, not merely as a fading legend but as a vital part of cultural identity. And as the sea continues to reveal its secrets, perhaps one day the world will be forced to acknowledge that beneath the waves of the Indian Ocean once thrived a civilization that history has long sought to forget. If the stories of Atlantis, Lemuria, Hyperborea, or Kumari Kandam still linger between the realms of legend and archaeology, then the story of Tartaria, or the Tartari Empire, presents a different and sharper challenge. This time the traces were not buried beneath the ocean. They once stood clearly marked on maps in European books and in the collective awareness of generations of Western scholars. Then suddenly, within less than 2 centuries, the name Tartaria vanished from world maps, from history textbooks, as if it had never existed. What truly happened? To understand the story, we must go back to the period from the 16th to the early 19th centuries. On many old European maps, especially those by Abraham Ortelius, Gerardus Mercator, Joan Bleu and others, the name Tartaria, or Grand Tartary, appears prominently, covering vast regions of northern and eastern Asia. From the Ural Mountains, stretching across Siberia, to the Pacific, including Manchuria, Mongolia, and even territories now part of Kazakhstan and much of Russia. In contemporary European geography books, Tartaria was described as a land of mystery, home to nomadic peoples, ancient cities, powerful rulers, and vast trade networks. Some maps even illustrated grand structures, from palaces to strange towers, across this vast land. Yet by the late 19th century, the term Tartaria had almost completely disappeared from official maps. The lands once grouped under this name were now subdivided under new geographic concepts: Siberia under Russian control, Manchuria under Chinese influence, Mongolia either independent or dominated, and Central Asia redefined by modern national borders. Simultaneously, European history and geography textbooks removed or minimized mentions of Tartaria, treating it as an outdated and inaccurate term. This sudden disappearance, like smoke vanishing from the canvas of history, has sparked many questions among independent researchers. If Tartaria had merely been a mistaken Western label for nomadic tribes, why was the name used so consistently for over 3 centuries? And if the region was truly just empty steppes, why do so many old documents and maps depict cities, trade routes, and even centers of learning? A key argument comes from the analysis of old maps. Researchers such as Anatoly Fomenko and many unorthodox historians point out that Mercator's 1595 map shows Tartaria with numerous clearly structured cities and symbols indicating a high level of development. Similarly, in early 17th century works by British geographer John Speed, Grand Tartary is depicted as an empire with complex political and social structures, not merely a land of wandering tribes. Moreover, many 18th century European engravings and illustrations depict architectural structures in Siberia and Central Asia with distinct styles, quite different from Russian or Chinese architecture of the time. Some ancient buildings still standing in Siberia, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan bear marks of advanced construction, beyond what nomadic communities would typically produce. Even more intriguing are references within secret European society documents, particularly in certain theosophical manuscripts and 19th century Russian mystical writings, describing Tartaria as an ancient civilization that once preserved advanced knowledge of energy, meteorology, and even construction technologies. Some legends suggest that the so-called lightning towers, large tower-like structures once seen in Russian cities, may be remnants of this civilization. But how could such a civilization be erased so completely from history? One compelling theory points to the role of the Russian Empire and its territorial expansion in the 18th and 19th centuries. As Russia conquered Siberia and Central Asia, consolidating those lands under Russian identity became a strategic goal. Acknowledging that an independent, advanced civilization like Tartaria had once existed there would have undermined the legitimacy of Russian annexation and assimilation efforts. It is no coincidence that following major Russian military campaigns, references to Tartaria were systematically removed. New maps issued by the Russian state eliminated the term Tartaria entirely, replacing it with Russian place names or more neutral geographic terms. Meanwhile, history textbooks reframed Grand Tartary as merely lands inhabited by savage tribes, stripping away any suggestion of a once flourishing civilization. This effort was not limited to Russia. In Europe, amid the rise of colonialism and the narrative of Western superiority, acknowledging a vast, sophisticated civilization deep within Asia was inconvenient. Western historians gradually shifted focus to subjects that fit more neatly within the Eurocentric historical model, leaving Tartaria to fade from academic discourse. By the mid-20th century, Tartaria was little more than a faint footnote in history books, if mentioned at all. An empire that had once appeared on world maps for centuries, with great cities, expansive trade networks, and complex governance, had vanished without a trace. Today, questions about Tartaria persist. Independent research communities, unorthodox archaeologists, and thousands of amateur scholars worldwide continue to search for clues. Each discovery, a strange architectural structure in Siberia, an uncatalogued ancient map, a forgotten line in an old manuscript, may add one more piece to the puzzle of Tartaria. And when we look back at the erasure of this name from official history, perhaps the most important question is not whether Tartaria truly existed, but why certain forces worked so hard to erase the memory of a civilization that may once have been great. If Tartaria showed us an empire that left its traces on maps only to be erased from history, then Scythia is one of the least understood civilizations of the ancient world, a familiar name to historians, yet what truly lies behind it remains shrouded in thick layers of mystery. In ancient records, the Scythians are often portrayed as fearsome nomadic warriors sweeping across the Eurasian steppes, but few know that their civilization, rich in culture, art, and knowledge, once commanded deep respect from mighty empires like Persia and Greece. And like many forgotten civilizations, much of the memory of Scythia has been distorted or deliberately reduced in official historical accounts. The earliest known sources on Scythia come from the Greek historian Herodotus, who travelled through Scythian lands in the 5th century BCE. In his histories, Herodotus describes a fierce, horse-riding people who lived freely on the vast steppes without permanent fortresses, yet possessed an extraordinary mastery of gold craftsmanship. He wrote of cavalry unmatched in battle, able to fight for days on horseback. Yet woven through his military accounts, Herodotus also recorded surprising details about the Scythians' spiritual life, their elaborate rituals, finely crafted religious artifacts, and mysterious connections with northern gods. What puzzles modern archaeologists and historians is the wealth of art and knowledge the Scythians left behind, a legacy at odds with the simplistic image of barbarian horsemen promoted in Roman and medieval accounts. Since the 18th century, when the first Scythian burial mounds were excavated in the Altai region, archaeologists have been astonished by intricate gold treasures, blending animal motifs, mythological figures, and metallurgical techniques of extraordinary sophistication. Among the most striking discoveries are the Pazyryk burial mounds, which preserved exquisitely carved wooden chariots, the world's oldest surviving woven carpets, and human remains bearing complex tattoos of animal symbols imbued with spiritual significance. Detailed analysis of these tattoos reveals a rich symbolic system connected to cosmology and deeply rooted spiritual beliefs. Yet the greater mystery lies in the disappearance of the Scythians from history. After dominating the Eurasian steppes from the 8th to the 3rd century BCE, Scythia seems to vanish from official historical records. Successor groups, such as the Sarmatians and the Huns, are described as new waves of migration, while any cultural links to the ancient Scythians are blurred or denied. Independent researchers argue that many cultural elements, from decorative arts and horse-riding techniques to funeral rites, of later steppe peoples bear the strong imprint of Scythian traditions. A bold hypothesis suggests that rather than disappearing, the Scythians gradually assimilated into other cultures, preserving their knowledge and artistry within hidden layers of cultural transmission. Adding to this, many medieval maps still marked Scythia as a region north of the Black Sea and across Central Asia, indicating that in the minds of European geographers, the name had never fully disappeared. It was only with the rise of modern nationalism and the redefinition of European ethnic identities that the term Scythia was gradually erased from official maps, replaced by new labels more aligned with modern nation-states. Another sensitive reason why Scythia is often downplayed in modern education lies in its connections to European secret societies. In manuscripts of the Rosicrucians and other esoteric groups of the 17th and 18th centuries, the Scythians were described as descendants of an ancient northern line of knowledge, believed to hold secrets about the cosmos, natural energies, and ancient medicine. These writings, once banned by the Catholic Church, further contributed to the suppression of Scythia's deeper historical image. Today, with the flourishing of steppe archaeology, new discoveries in Kazakhstan, the Altai Mountains, and regions around the Black Sea continue to reveal a Scythia far more sophisticated and vibrant than the narrative imposed by earlier powers. Yet these revelations also fuel intense debates about Scythia's true place in human history. The story of Scythia reminds us that the existence of a civilization is not always reflected honestly in the pages of official history. Sometimes what remains are hidden currents, in finely worked gold, in ancient tattoos, or in legends once dismissed as mere tales of nomads. And at times it is precisely this deliberate forgetting that most clearly reflects the conspiracies and power plays that shape the official records of humanity. Along the ancient Silk Road, a vast trade network that connected East and West for thousands of years, there was once a name that resonated as a symbol of knowledge, art, openness, and prosperity. That name was Sogdiana. Yet curiously, today it has all but vanished from the official flow of history, surviving only in scattered specialized texts rarely encountered by the general public. This raises an important question. Why has a civilization that once stood at the heart of the greatest exchange network of the ancient world, helping to spread ideas and technologies on a global scale, been pushed into obscurity? And what in Sogdiana's history made certain powers so determined to blur or erase the memory of this land? Sogdiana, also known as Sugd or Sogdia, was a region between the Zeravshan and Kashkadaria river basins in what is now Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. At its height, from the 6th century BCE to the 10th century CE, Sogdiana was one of the most important centers of trade, culture, and learning along the Silk Road, with flourishing cities like Samarkand, Bukhara, and Panjakent. Unlike many civilizations defined by conquest or strict national borders, Sogdiana was a culture of exchange, where merchants, scholars, artists, and believers of many faiths gathered. The Sogdians transported not only silk, spices, and gemstones, but also ideas, books, technologies, and knowledge from every corner of the ancient world. Remarkably, for centuries, the Sogdians served as the silent couriers of knowledge. They copied and transmitted mathematical and astronomical texts from India, medical works from Persia, Buddhist scriptures from China, and mystical writings from Jewish and Eastern Christian communities. Many manuscripts that eventually reached Europe via the Arab world had passed through Sogdian hands at some point in their journey. For this reason, Sogdiana was not just a trading hub, it was a crossroads for forbidden knowledge. In secluded monasteries and Sogdian merchant guilds, books banned in both East and West were secretly copied and preserved. Many modern scholars believe that without these Sogdian channels, much ancient knowledge would never have escaped the rigid censorship of empires. But this role also made Sogdiana a threat in the eyes of political and religious powers. As empires expanded, they sought to control not just territory, but also the flow of information and knowledge. An independent merchant community, unbound by rigid dogmas and serving as a conduit for dangerous ideas, was something those powers could not tolerate. This explains why, from the 10th century onward, as Orthodox Islamic dynasties consolidated power in Central Asia, Sogdian cities were systematically attacked and suppressed. Private libraries were burned, manuscripts seized, scholars executed or forced into exile. Scattered Sogdian communities survived in remote oases. But the brilliance of a civilization that had once illuminated the Silk Road began to fade. At the same time, in the official histories of these new dynasties, the name Sogdiana was gradually erased. Islamic chronicles of the 11th and 12th centuries barely mentioned Sogdiana as a center of knowledge. In the West, as Arabic translations flowed into medieval Europe, the role of the Sogdians in transmitting knowledge was deliberately downplayed in favor of highlighting Islamic centers like Baghdad. Thus, well into the 20th century, the name Sogdiana appeared only in archaeological studies or in the writings of a few dedicated Orientalists. A civilization that had played a vital role in maintaining the intercontinental flow of knowledge was pushed into the shadows of history. Today, with new archaeological discoveries at Panjakent, Samarkand, and Bukhara, we are beginning to better understand the cultural and intellectual depth of the Sogdians. Wall paintings depict scenes of merchants from diverse cultures. Inscriptions reveal a remarkable capacity to absorb and transform varied ideologies, and the burned remains of ancient libraries still testify to a golden age that was deliberately obscured. Sogdiana teaches us a profound lesson. In history, it is not always those with the largest territories or strongest armies who leave the deepest mark. Sometimes it is the silent couriers, small communities driven by freedom of thought and a passion for knowledge, who truly shape the flow of human civilization. And perhaps it was precisely this quiet yet far-reaching influence that made certain powers so determined to erase Sogdiana's name from our collective memory. If Sogdiana was once a crossroads of knowledge, then Ophir, the mythical kingdom described in biblical texts, stood as a symbol of unimaginable wealth, a name filled with allure where King Solomon's fabled fleets once sailed across distant seas, returning laden with gold, ivory, and rare treasures. Yet paradoxically, to this day, Ophir remains one of the most mysterious civilizations, or destinations, ever mentioned in religious and historical records. The question, where exactly was Ophir and did it truly exist, has puzzled scholars for centuries, sparking efforts to obscure and downplay its story. Ophir first appears in the Old Testament, specifically in the books of Kings and Chronicles. According to these accounts, King Solomon, renowned for his wisdom and unmatched wealth, sent fleets in alliance with King Hiram of Tyre to seek out Ophir. After 3 years at sea, these ships returned with a staggering haul of gold, 420 talents, over 15 metric tons, an amount capable of shaking the economy of any ancient kingdom. But Ophir was more than a source of gold. The Bible describes its fleets bringing back silver, rare woods, gemstones, ivory, apes, and exotic birds, suggesting that Ophir was a rich trading center connected to tropical regions far beyond Israel's borders. As early as the Middle Ages, the true location of Ophir became one of the most tantalizing mysteries for explorers and theologians alike. Countless theories emerged, pointing to the Arabian Peninsula, East Africa, India, and even Southeast Asia. Marco Polo himself suspected that Ophir might lie in what is now Sumatra or Malacca, regions known for vibrant trade in precious woods and gold. Some 16th-century European maps even marked an uncertain Ophir somewhere in the Indian Ocean. Yet what complicates the story of Ophir is the interference of political and religious forces. During the height of Catholic Church authority, precisely identifying Ophir was seen as dangerous. For if Ophir were proven to lie beyond the Christian world, it would challenge the Eurocentric cosmology the Church sought to maintain. Thus, in many medieval and Renaissance Bible translations, references to Ophir were shortened or left vague. Some Latin editions of the Bible even omitted the detailed lists of exotic goods, deliberately avoiding questions about ancient Israel's links to foreign, unacknowledged civilizations. During the Age of Exploration, Ophir again became both an excuse for and a source of controversy. The Portuguese, upon occupying East African ports, claimed to have found a new Ophir at Sofala, Mozambique, even building monuments to commemorate the supposed discovery. Yet later, historians revealed this to be mere propaganda, lacking any convincing archaeological evidence. Conversely, some 19th-century Orientalist scholars proposed that Ophir was in India, specifically Tamil Nadu, a region with ancient traditions of gold mining, ivory trade, and luxury goods matching biblical descriptions. In fact, the word Ophir may derive from the Tamil Oviyar, meaning artisans and traders of precious objects. Intriguingly, ancient Arab merchant records describe voyages to gold-rich lands in the east, journeys lasting up to 3 years, mirroring the length of King Solomon's expeditions. Some chronicles suggest that Arab traders once transported gold and exotic goods from Southeast Asia to the Middle East via long Indian Ocean trade routes. So why does the story of Ophir remain so obscured? One key reason is that colonial powers and modern political forces have shown little interest in acknowledging that Eastern civilizations were deeply linked to the ancient Near East. Admitting that ancient Israel's economy may have depended on seaborne trade networks controlled by Eastern merchants would unsettle many Western historical narratives. Moreover, in the 20th century, when archaeological surveys in East Africa, India, and Southeast Asia uncovered sites tied to ancient gold trade, publication of these findings was often restricted to avoid reigniting sensitive religious and political debates. Today, while no one can say with certainty where Ophir was, one truth is clear. Ophir was more than a place. It was a symbol of global connectivity in ancient times, a thread in the vast fabric of trade, culture, and knowledge deliberately obscured for reasons both religious and political. And each time an ancient map is unrolled or an Eastern artifact surfaces in a Middle Eastern tomb, the question of Ophir echoes once more, reminding us that history is full of untold pathways still waiting to be explored. In South America, where the towering Andes embrace lush green valleys and where the Amazon rainforest conceals almost every trace of prehistory, countless stories remain untold. Among them, one of the greatest, though rarely mentioned, continues to intrigue archaeologists and independent researchers alike, the story of Zana Valley, a legendary valley where local legends speak of a once prosperous empire, one that possessed knowledge and technology far beyond the rest of the continent in its time. Yet almost every trace of it has been buried by time and by powerful forces that did not want history rewritten. Zana Valley, according to scattered accounts and indigenous lore, lies deep within the northern Peruvian jungle near the modern border with Ecuador. As early as the 16th century, when Spanish expeditions ventured into these lands in search of Inca gold, vague reports surfaced of an isolated valley, home to strange stone structures and a wealthy people living apart from known civilizations. Conquistador Pedro de Tiesa de Leon once recorded in his journals hearing tales of a valley of stone walls and a river of gold, but lacked the time to investigate. Jesuit missionary records from their work in South America also referenced rumors of Zana Valley. A report sent to the Vatican in 1609, now housed in the Church's secret archives, described local accounts of a small but wealthy kingdom known for goldworking and crafting unusual alloys. Yet within a few decades, mentions of Zana Valley vanished from such reports, as though an unspoken directive had halted all further exploration in that direction. The Chachapoya people, known as warriors of the clouds, who once inhabited this region, preserved legends of an ancient kingdom deep within a hidden valley where rulers built vast stone structures. Strikingly, the construction techniques described in these tales resemble technologies that remain unexplained even today, echoing the mysteries of Sacsayhuaman and Machu Picchu. The 20th century marked a turning point. In 1965, Peruvian archaeologist Federico Kaufmann Doig led an expedition to the Zana Valley, uncovering massive stone ruins, towering walls, built from multi-ton blocks with no trace of metal tools, They also found underground corridors, strange altars, and fragments of alloyed objects containing platinum, a metal supposedly beyond the capabilities of ancient metallurgy to refine in pure form. Yet what made the story even more mysterious was the response from authorities. Soon after these initial discoveries, excavations in Zana Valley were abruptly halted. The Peruvian government, citing environmental and cultural preservation, imposed a strict ban on all unauthorized archaeological activity in the region. Independent researchers seeking access were either denied permits or entangled in complex bureaucratic barriers. Leaked internal reports from the Peruvian Institute of Archaeology revealed that some findings in Zana Valley might challenge current theories regarding the development of pre-Inca civilizations. Radiocarbon dating of wooden materials from subterranean structures yielded ages of over 3,000 years, suggesting these constructions predated the Inca by millennia. Furthermore, in Jesuit archives in Lima, old manuscripts mention missionaries in the 17th century discovering inscriptions in Zana, written in a symbolic system not yet deciphered, unlike the well-known Inca Quipu. Some scholars suspect this may represent a lost written language. What then really happened to the empire of Zana Valley? Could it have been an independent center of knowledge and commerce, flourishing alongside known civilizations? And if so, why were its traces so deliberately obscured? One hypothesis suggests that Zana Valley once lay on an ancient trade route linking the Amazon with the Pacific coast. Its wealth and advanced metalworking may have posed a threat to both the Spanish conquerors and to Inca rulers seeking absolute control over the Andes. Systematic efforts to suppress or destroy evidence of this civilization may have begun during the colonial period and continued well into the 20th century. Today, Zana Valley remains one of South America's least explored archaeological regions. Modern expeditions face rugged terrain, strict conservation laws, and formidable bureaucratic hurdles. Yet within independent research circles, Zana Valley has become a symbol, a reminder that stories lost in the deep forest may still hold secrets capable of reshaping our understanding of human history. And as the Amazon rainforest steadily recedes, each ruin, each fragment unearthed in Zana Valley becomes ever more precious, like a final whisper from a civilization the world tried so hard to forget. Perhaps nowhere on Earth holds as many secrets as the Amazon rainforest, a vast expanse of more than 5.5 million square kilometers, over 80% of which remains largely unexplored. For centuries, the Amazon was viewed as a blank space on the world's archaeological map, a wild land believed to harbor only scattered tribes, with no advanced civilization ever having developed there. But was this emptiness real, or the result of a history deliberately obscured? Among the Amazon's deepest mysteries, one story stands out: the legend of the lost city of Z. Throughout the 20th century, explorers risked their lives, and sometimes paid the ultimate price, in search of this fabled civilization. Yet behind the dream of Z lies a deeper question. Could the Amazon once have been home to one or more complex prehistoric civilizations, contradicting the narrative long taught by mainstream history? The legend of Z is closely linked to British explorer Colonel Percy Fawcett. In the early 20th century, Fawcett, an experienced surveyor with a keen eye for ancient maps and secret documents, stumbled upon an old manuscript in Rio de Janeiro's Royal Library, Manuscript 512. This manuscript, attributed to an 18th century Portuguese explorer, described a stone city deep within the rainforest, with inscribed columns, colossal statues, and vast buildings. The details were too precise to dismiss as fantasy. Fawcett believed the manuscript preserved the memory of a lost civilization, which he named the Lost City of Z. But Fawcett was not the first to suggest that large civilizations once thrived in the Amazon. In accounts from 16th-century Spanish expeditions, Francisco de Orellana, the first European to navigate the Amazon River, described encountering great cities, large populations, sophisticated agriculture, and powerful armies. Yet when later expeditions returned, these cities seemed to have vanished. The official explanation has long been that these communities collapsed due to European-born diseases. Yet that theory does not account for reports of stone architecture or advanced agricultural systems. A bolder, and rarely discussed, hypothesis suggests that colonial authorities deliberately erased evidence of complex native civilizations to justify portraying the Amazon as an empty wilderness, ripe for exploitation. For decades, mainstream scholars dismissed the idea of advanced Amazonian civilizations, citing the belief that rainforest soils were too poor to sustain large agricultural societies. But recent discoveries have completely transformed that view. Since the 2000s, with the advent of LiDAR, light detection and ranging technology, archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of massive geometric structures, ditches, earthen walls, and circular or square foundations hundreds of meters across, hidden beneath the forest canopy. These structures, thousands of years old, clearly required sophisticated social organization. Additionally, the discovery of terra preta, artificial nutrient-rich black soil, proves that prehistoric Amazonians developed sustainable large-scale agriculture, transforming rainforest soil to support thriving communities. These regions show evidence of large agricultural settlements, a stark contrast to the long-held image of scattered hunter-gatherer bands. So what was Fawcett's City of Z? Many modern researchers believe it may have been a composite memory, one of multiple great cities that once dotted the Amazon. Some LiDAR maps have revealed networks of interconnected settlements, raised causeways linking communities, in a manner strikingly similar to ancient urban complexes. Yet strangely, despite growing evidence, large-scale excavations in the Amazon remain limited, hindered by difficult terrain, political obstacles, and economic interests. Acknowledging that the Amazon once hosted major civilizations could spark indigenous claims to cultural and territorial rights, a reality some governments and corporations prefer to avoid. Moreover, certain voices in mainstream archaeology still cling to conservative views, reluctant to admit that South America's history may be far more complex than textbooks have long portrayed. Meanwhile, indigenous legends persist. Many Amazonian tribes tell of ancestral cities, sacred places hidden deep within the forest, where outsiders are not permitted to tread. Some even say that guardians still protect these ancient cities, living in secrecy beyond the reach of the modern world. Today, as modern technology allows us to peer beneath the forest's green veil, we may be only beginning to grasp the scale and sophistication of the civilizations that once flourished in the Amazon. The lost city of Z may not be a single metropolis, but a symbol of an entire lost chapter of history, one that, when fully revealed, could force us to rewrite our understanding of South America's past. If there is one symbol that continues to astonish the modern world, while baffling archaeologists and historians for centuries, it is surely the pyramids of Egypt. Massive stone blocks stacked with perfect precision, secret chambers and corridors aligned with accuracy, measured in thousandths of a millimeter, all standing as a timeless challenge from the past. Who built them? And how? The official answer: that the pyramids, particularly the Great Pyramid of Giza, were constructed by the pharaohs of Egypt's fourth dynasty, has been taught in textbooks for generations. Yet as deeper studies emerge, an increasing number of questions remain unresolved within this framework. First, there is the issue of dating. While mainstream scholars place the construction of the Great Pyramid around 2560 BCE, during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, Cheops, geological and archaeological analyses suggest otherwise. Weathering patterns on the pyramid surface appear to result from prolonged rainfall, a climatic phenomenon that has not occurred in Egypt since the Sahara underwent intense desertification more than 10,000 years ago. Boston University geologist Robert Schoch shocked the academic world by analyzing erosion on the Sphinx and nearby stones at Giza, concluding they had been worn by rainwater rather than mere wind and sand. If true, this would imply that at least the foundations, or original structures, of these monuments predate Egypt's known dynasties, reaching back to a prehistoric era. Further complicating the story are the archaeological facts themselves. The blocks used to build the Great Pyramid average between 2.5 and 15 tons, with some interior stones weighing over 70 tons. Transporting, cutting, and assembling them with perfect precision and using Bronze Age tools remains an unsolved puzzle. Excavated tools found near the site do not match the level of technology required to cut and polish such hard granite. Moreover, direct inscriptions from Pharaoh Khufu's time make almost no mention of pyramid construction, highly unusual for a culture known for meticulously recording its grand projects to glorify its kings. Another curious element is the Great Pyramid's internal structure. The arrangement of corridors, hidden chambers, and air shafts aligned with specific star constellations, notably the Orion Belt, linked to the god Osiris, reflects an astonishing level of astronomical knowledge far beyond what was needed for a simple royal tomb. Researchers like Robert Bauval have demonstrated that the pyramid's central axis and the placement of the neighboring pyramids align with Orion's belt, as it would have appeared in Egypt's skies around 10,500 BCE. Is this coincidence? Or evidence that the builders possessed deep astronomical knowledge and possibly planned their work in a time far older than mainstream history accepts? There is also a subtler, more controversial aspect, the connection to pre-pharaonic civilizations. Many ancient Egyptian legends speak of the Zep Tepi, the first time, an era when gods or visitors from afar taught humanity the arts of building, astronomy, and profound knowledge. While mainstream historians dismiss this as myth, ancient records, such as the Palermo stone and inscriptions at the Temple of Edfu, mention dynasties before the pharaohs, with rulers reigning thousands of years before Egypt's first dynasty, raising difficult questions. Some independent scholars suggest that a prehistoric civilization may once have flourished along the Nile, achieving high levels of technical knowledge before collapsing due to climate catastrophe or geological upheaval. The Giza pyramids and the Sphinx may be their legacy, later adapted or reused by the ancient Egyptians. Notably, during the 19th and early 20th centuries, many studies proposing the existence of a pre-pharaonic civilization faced fierce opposition from mainstream academics and religious authorities. Acknowledging a highly advanced civilization existing before the biblical timeline threatened the religious and cosmological beliefs of the era. Consequently, inconvenient archaeological evidence was sometimes overlooked, and alternative theories were often excluded from official academic publications. Even today, scholars who propose non-mainstream theories about the pyramid's true origins face skepticism and resistance from conservative archaeological circles, yet the stone walls remain, the massive blocks still stand defying time, bearing the silent marks of a past we may not yet fully understand. And perhaps the question, who truly built these great pyramids, will continue to stir curiosity and challenge the boundaries of accepted history for generations to come. If the Egyptian pyramids make us question the technical mastery of ancient civilizations, then the discovery of Göbekli Tepe, a massive stone complex buried for tens of thousands of years beneath the soil of Turkey, has shaken the very foundations of traditional human history. For Göbekli Tepe, dated to over 12,000 years old, comes from an era when, according to mainstream history, humans were still scattered in small bands of hunter-gatherers, unfamiliar with agriculture, and far from building complex societies, let alone sophisticated architecture. Who then built this site, and why was it buried and forgotten for millennia? The story began in 1994, when German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt and his team stumbled upon massive T-shaped stone pillars at a mound called Göbekli Tepe near Şanlıurfa, Turkey. Initially classified as a Neolithic burial site, the truth soon stunned the archaeological world. Towering stone pillars, up to 6 meters tall, weighing between 10 and 20 tons, stood arranged in complete concentric circles. Carved into their surfaces were remarkably detailed images: lions, snakes, birds, foxes, wild cattle, and other symbolic figures. Researchers quickly realized this was no burial site, but an intricate ceremonial complex, perhaps the oldest temple yet known to humanity. Even more astonishing was its dating. Radiocarbon analysis showed that Göbekli Tepe was built around 9,600 BCE, during a period when, according to established history, civilization was not supposed to exist. This discovery overturned the entire theory of human societal evolution. If history books are correct, only after humans settled down, domesticated plants and animals, and developed agriculture, could they construct such elaborate monuments. Yet, Göbekli Tepe proves otherwise. Hunter-gatherer communities, or at least societies on the cusp of civilization, could organize labor forces, transport massive stones, and design architectural and symbolic complexes of extraordinary sophistication. Who could have achieved this? This question continues to divide the academic world. Some mainstream scholars reluctantly accept that hunter-gatherer societies may have been more complex than previously thought. But many independent researchers raise deeper questions. How could supposedly unsophisticated groups, lacking construction techniques and mechanical tools, move and assemble multi-ton stones with such precision? Moreover, the symbols and carvings at Göbekli Tepe seem to reflect a complex cosmology with advanced astronomical symbolism. Some researchers argue that the stone pillars were arranged to mark celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, and specific positions of star constellations. Astronomer Martin B. Sweatman and colleagues have analyzed these symbols and proposed that they record a massive comet impact around 10,900 years ago, coinciding with the onset of the Younger Dryas Ice Age. If true, the builders of Göbekli Tepe were not just craftsmen, but astronomers with profound cosmic knowledge. Another mystery is why this entire complex was deliberately buried. Archaeologists found that Göbekli Tepe's circles had been carefully filled in with earth and debris, an intentional act, not a result of natural erosion. Such deliberate burial required a massive collective effort, prompting even more questions. Was this due to a cultural upheaval, a natural disaster, or a profound religious shift that compelled the builders to bury the site's memory? Or, as some theorists suggest, could the sudden transition from egalitarian hunter-gatherer societies to hierarchical agricultural ones have driven a deliberate erasure of older sacred symbols? The deeper researchers dig, the clearer it becomes that Göbekli Tepe may not be unique. Ongoing LiDAR surveys and stratigraphic studies are revealing similar traces of other such sites across the Fertile Crescent, raising a staggering possibility. During an era when mainstream history claims humanity was barely emerging from caves, a network of ritual, architectural, and intellectual centers may have spanned this region. Yet despite mounting evidence, Göbekli Tepe remains largely overlooked, or briefly mentioned, in many national history textbooks. perhaps because acknowledging its significance would require rewriting our entire understanding of civilization's progress. And perhaps, as some independent scholars suspect, Göbekli Tepe hints at ancient layers of knowledge that long predate the civilizations we know. If recovered and understood, such knowledge could transform how humanity views its own story, and that perhaps is something some forces would prefer to prevent. Among all the stories of distorted history, perhaps no region of the world has suffered such systematic erasure as Africa. For centuries, from the colonial era to the present day, the Western portrayal of Africa, and the version taught in many textbooks, has often been deliberately reduced to the image of a land without history, a vast expanse of primitive tribes locked in eternal chaos. Yet the truth, as we shall see, is far more complex and far more magnificent. Across this great continent once flourished vibrant civilizations, mighty trade empires, centers of learning, and awe-inspiring stone cities that for many reasons were deliberately erased from official history. Among them, two names stand out: Great Zimbabwe and the ancient Mali Empire. Let us begin with Zimbabwe, a name long shrouded in so-called mystery throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. When European explorers first arrived in the southern African highlands in the 19th century, they were astonished to discover the ruins of a massive stone complex, walls of unmortared stone rising 11 meters high, stretching hundreds of meters in length, mysterious conical towers, and intricately carved altars. The local people called this place Zimbabwe, House of Great Stone, from which the name Zimbabwe would later emerge. Yet instead of acknowledging that local African peoples had once possessed the knowledge and skill to build such marvels, European colonial powers, particularly during the British Empire, worked tirelessly to deny this fact. They put forth outlandish theories, attributing the structures to the ancient Phoenicians, the Arabs, even lost civilizations from the Mediterranean. The goal was clear: to admit that the Shona and other Bantu peoples had once achieved such high levels of architectural and social sophistication would undermine the very foundation of the colonial narrative, the so-called civilizing mission of the white man. For decades, colonial archaeologists were pressured to omit or distort evidence linking Great Zimbabwe to its indigenous builders. Scholars such as Gertrude Caton Thompson, who dared to publicly assert that the ruins were indeed the work of ancient African peoples, faced harsh criticism and professional isolation. Today, modern archaeological analysis has definitively proven that Great Zimbabwe was built by Bantu-speaking communities between the 11th and 15th centuries. Yet an awkward silence still hangs over many Western textbooks. Centuries of deliberate denial have left a lasting legacy, a legacy of erasure. If the story of Zimbabwe was rewritten to serve colonial aims, then the story of ancient Mali reveals another dimension: the hidden global influence of an African empire. During the 13th and 14th centuries, while Europe languished in the depths of the Middle Ages, the Mali Empire stood as one of the wealthiest and most advanced nations in the world. Its capital, Timbuktu, was a great center of scholarship and commerce. The University of Sankore in Timbuktu attracted scholars from across the Islamic world, with hundreds of thousands of manuscripts on mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, and law copied and studied there. While Europe still struggled under rigid religious orthodoxy, the scholars of Timbuktu were discussing precise planetary motions, advanced healing methods, and even cosmological theories that would later be rediscovered during the European Renaissance. But why do we rarely hear of this story? Partly because of the colonial legacy. When France conquered West Africa in the late 19th century, it worked to control and impoverish the intellectual heritage of Timbuktu. Many precious manuscripts were confiscated and transported to Paris or European libraries. Some were destroyed, an effort to erase the memory of African intellectual brilliance. Moreover, acknowledging that Africa once housed great centers of knowledge directly challenged the image that colonial empires sought to maintain, an Africa portrayed as backward, in need of civilizing. Even today, in many mainstream history curricula across the West, ancient Mali and the legacy of Timbuktu are scarcely mentioned, if at all. Yet the ancient manuscripts remain. Hundreds of thousands of scrolls are still preserved by local communities, quietly, patiently, awaiting the day when their true story may again be heard. And increasingly researchers are returning to study and restore this hidden treasury of knowledge. The stories of Zimbabwe and ancient Mali teach us this, that history is not only about what happened, but about what is chosen to be remembered and what is chosen to be forgotten. And in Africa, perhaps many such forgotten chapters still await to be written, more fairly and more truthfully. When we speak of pre-Columbian civilizations in the Americas, most people think of the Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca, names that have entered both textbooks and the public imagination. Yet few know that before all three of these civilizations, there existed a mysterious culture, considered the mother civilization of Mesoamerica. This was the Olmec civilization. And at its very heart lies a mystery that remains unsolved to this day, the colossal stone heads, whose faces do not resemble any known indigenous peoples of the Americas. These stone heads, towering up to 3 meters high, weighing anywhere from 6 to 50 tons, have been discovered at sites such as La Venta, San Lorenzo, and Tres Zapotes in what is now the Mexican states of Veracruz and Tabasco. Since their discovery in the early 20th century, they have puzzled archaeologists, not merely for their immense size or exquisite craftsmanship, but for the striking features they portray. The Olmec heads display characteristics that many scholars cannot ignore: broad noses, full lips, high cheekbones, features uncommon among known Native American populations. From the moment the first heads were unearthed, some researchers began to ask a bold question: could these colossal heads be evidence of an ancient African presence in the Americas? That question has become the center of intense academic debate, and a politically charged one at that. Independent researchers such as Ivan van Sertima in his book They Came Before Columbus have argued that it is possible there were transoceanic contacts between Africa and the Americas thousands of years before Columbus. Van Sertima and his supporters point out that the features of the Olmec heads bear a strong resemblance to West African groups, particularly the Mando peoples. In addition, they cite certain symbolic similarities, metalworking techniques, and mythological motifs that may reflect echoes of ancient contact. Some archaeological sites even yield artifacts that could hint at foreign origins, though these findings are often left unpublished due to their controversial nature. Of course, mainstream archaeology strongly rejects this hypothesis. In their view, the Olmec heads represent an indigenous artistic style, and the so-called African features are a matter of subjective interpretation. They argue that there is no definitive genetic or archaeological evidence proving an African presence in the Americas prior to European exploration. Yet what makes the story even more intriguing is how these debates have been carefully controlled. Throughout the 20th century, researchers who supported theories of pre-Columbian transoceanic contact faced significant barriers when attempting to publish their work in mainstream scientific journals. Many studies on ancient transoceanic exchange were either rejected outright or quietly excluded from major academic conferences. Some scholars suggest that this blanket denial is not purely academic but political. There is a strong desire to preserve a clean narrative of isolated development in which the Americas' indigenous civilizations are portrayed as having evolved entirely independently of outside influence. To acknowledge an early African presence, or that of any other external group, would require rewriting major portions of global history, a task fraught with political sensitivities and long-standing prejudices. Meanwhile, the Olmec culture itself presents other enigmas. The civilization appears to have emerged almost suddenly around 1500 BCE, with high levels of artistry, sophisticated construction techniques, and complex social organization, yet with few clear signs of a gradual internal evolution. Cities like La Venta reveal advanced urban planning, intricate ceremonial structures, and deeply layered belief systems. Moreover, many Olmec symbols bear curious similarities to ancient African iconography, from geometric patterns and solar symbols to representations of sacred animals. Are these simply coincidences, or are they faint traces of ancient transoceanic contact, traces we are not yet prepared to fully confront? Today, with advances in genetic science and material analysis, perhaps in the near future, we may begin to uncover more definitive answers about the origins and connections of the Olmec civilization. But for now, the colossal heads remain silent, enigmatic, challenging the historical narratives that have endured for so long. And the question of the Olmecs, whether they were, in fact, ancient black giants of the Americas, remains one of the greatest unresolved mysteries, not only of American archaeology, but of the history of global civilization. If there is any symbol that embodies forgotten knowledge, the burned chapters of human history, it is none more fitting than the Library of Alexandria. Even now, long after it has faded into legend, the name Alexandria continues to stir the hearts of those who care about knowledge, because we know that in that place there once existed a vast treasury of wisdom that today's world can only dream of. Yet what is spoken of less often is this: which parts of that knowledge were lost, and which parts were deliberately erased. The Library of Alexandria was founded around the 3rd century BCE, during the reign of Ptolemy I or Ptolemy II. Its mission was both clear and ambitious: to gather all the knowledge of the known world from every civilization into one place. Ships arriving at the port of Alexandria were required to surrender all books on board for copying, with the originals kept for the library. Envoys were dispatched across the world, from Athens and Pergamon to as far as India, to collect scrolls. At its height, the Library of Alexandria is believed to have housed between 400,000 and perhaps as many as 700,000 papyrus scrolls, an astonishing number for any archive of the ancient world. But the fate of this library remains shrouded in darkness and layers of historical fog. We know it was destroyed, or suffered multiple waves of destruction, but not precisely when or under what circumstances. The records are contradictory: a great fire during Julius Caesar's campaign, the Arab conquests, destruction by Christian zealots, or perhaps a slow accumulation of neglect, conquest, and deliberate erasure. What is most noteworthy, however, is that the entire library was not burned in a single event. Many scholars believe that large portions of the collection were removed deliberately, before or during times of upheaval. So what was truly lost, and what was purposefully made to disappear? First, it must be emphasized that the Library of Alexandria was not merely an archive of Greek and Roman works. It contained Egyptian texts, translations from Sanskrit, Babylonian, medical and astronomical records, technical treatises from the Phoenicians, Zoroastrian religious writings, and materials from far-flung Eastern civilizations. Scattered accounts from ancient scholars, such as Callimachus, Eratosthenes, and Ptolemy, suggest the library held scrolls on mechanical engineering, automated devices, energy, and astronomical theories far ahead of their time. There are mentions of atomic theory, heliocentric models of the solar system, and advanced star maps. Some documents were said to describe ancient sea voyages, possibly from Africa to the Americas. Records of advanced metallurgy, special alloys, and methods of constructing monumental works such as the Egyptian pyramids may also have been present. More significantly, many modern researchers suspect that a large portion of the library contained human history, records from prehistoric civilizations, ancient myths passed down through countless generations. Some texts may have included references to lost civilizations such as Atlantis, Lemuria, or pre-pharaonic cultures. But who would have benefited from erasing such knowledge? One widely discussed theory among independent scholars is this. When Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire, extremist factions within the Church were motivated to control the flow of knowledge. Any ideas that challenged theological doctrine or supported alternative cosmologies were deemed dangerous. The systematic destruction of heretical texts, or so-called magical works, became widespread. The Library of Alexandria presented an obvious target. Later, when Arab forces conquered Egypt, some accounts suggest that what remained of the library's holdings underwent careful review. Texts deemed compatible with Islamic philosophy or of practical value were preserved. Those considered heretical or religiously problematic were destroyed. So what was truly lost, we do not know, perhaps never will. But fragmentary records point to an immense loss. The Roman historian Aulus Gellius wrote that the scientific and technical works of ancient Egypt alone comprised tens of thousands of scrolls. Records of neighboring civilizations, Ethiopia, ancient Libya, Mesopotamia, were also present. Many modern scholars suspect that early records of long climate cycles, asteroid impacts, and geological upheavals may have been lost with the library. Such knowledge, if preserved, could help us better understand the cycles of destruction and renewal in human history. In addition, there is reason to believe that technical documents were among those stored at Alexandria. Descriptions of automated machines, steam power, and advanced mechanical principles appear in scattered accounts from the era of Heron of Alexandria, a scholar who once worked in the city. But the original models and detailed instructions have vanished without a trace. One final question remains. Could any fragments of the library's knowledge still survive? Some theories suggest that secretive monasteries, Western esoteric societies, or hidden archives in the Middle East may yet hold rare copies, but so far no public evidence has confirmed this. Whatever the truth, the shadow of the Library of Alexandria continues to loom over the story of human knowledge, a bitter reminder that not all wisdom is passed down, and that some chapters of our history were burned, not by accident, but by the deliberate hand of power. Among all stories of hidden history, perhaps none sparks deeper controversy than the idea of a pre-Adamic civilization. A civilization that may have flourished on Earth before modern humans, as described in the Bible, ever appeared. To many, this is an unthinkable concept, for it directly challenges some of humanity's oldest religious foundations. Yet what makes this story even more compelling is this. Many sources suggest that deep within the Vatican archives, the most heavily guarded collection of knowledge in the world, there exist ancient documents that speak of just this. The notion of the pre-Adamic is not new. Even as early as the Middle Ages, theologians and philosophers questioned whether intelligent beings may have existed before Adam, the first man according to Scripture. Church fathers such as Origen and even St. Augustine once pondered the idea of prior ages of the world referred to in mystical texts as seculae priores. However, as the Christian Church solidified its official doctrine, such ideas were pushed to the margins and even branded as heresy. Yet according to reports leaked by researchers with access to the Vatican's inner circles, not all ancient texts on this subject were destroyed. Some were quietly preserved. within a section known as the Archivum Secretum Apostolicum Vaticanum, now officially called the Vatican Apostolic Archive. According to accounts from certain scholars who gained rare access to the deeper layers of the Vatican archives, there exists a collection of manuscripts, largely written in ancient Greek, Coptic, and certain Eastern languages, that describe traditions of eras long before Adam's creation. In particular, among a group of documents connected to Gnostic theology, long deemed heretical by the Church, there are descriptions of successive cycles of creation in which present humanity is only the fourth or fifth iteration. These pre-Adamic civilizations are said to have reached great heights of knowledge and technology, but were ultimately destroyed through hubris or cosmic cataclysm. Some texts even mention buried cities, machines beyond human comprehension, and stone pillars inscribed with symbols no one on Earth can now decipher. But why are such documents so carefully hidden? One obvious reason is that they contradict the Church's account of human history. Admitting that civilizations predated Adam would not only undermine the concept of original sin, but also challenge a theological structure that has stood for over 1,500 years. Furthermore, these manuscripts contain provocative details regarding the nature of humankind itself. Some describe pre-Adamic beings as not fully resembling modern humans, possibly taller, possessing different biological or spiritual characteristics. This raises unsettling questions about ancient species that may have once coexisted on Earth, an idea sensitive to both mainstream science and religious orthodoxy. It is also noteworthy that in the 19th century, as inconvenient archaeological discoveries began surfacing, such as extremely ancient stone tools and mysterious underground structures, some researchers linked these findings to the concept of pre-Adamic civilizations. Yet most such research was swiftly marginalized or excluded from mainstream academic circles. According to certain sources from scholars who have worked within the Vatican archives, internal directives explicitly mandate that materials on this subject must be permanently archived, never copied or made public. Some key manuscripts are even said to be encrypted or concealed within unindexed collections. Beyond manuscripts, there are rumors that the Vatican also holds artifacts allegedly linked to pre-Adamic civilizations. These objects have never been displayed publicly. Some reports describe stone tablets engraved with symbols from no known language and certain metal tools exhibiting purity and craftsmanship far beyond what ancient technologies are thought capable of producing. Of course, the Vatican neither confirms nor denies the existence of these materials. And access to the most sensitive areas of the archives requires a level of clearance so high that almost no scholar outside the inner church hierarchy can attain it. Yet clues continue to surface. Internal reports, testimonies from scholars who glimpsed the manuscripts, and leaked correspondence within the theological research community all point to a striking conclusion. The Vatican holds documents suggesting that human history may be far more complex than the publicly accepted narrative. And if these records were ever decoded and revealed, they would force the world to reconsider its entire understanding of the past, of origins, of human nature, and of our true place in the cosmic flow of history. Until that day comes, the story of a pre-Adamic civilization will remain one of the deepest secrets, not only behind the stone doors of the Vatican, but within the complacency of modern knowledge itself. Throughout the flow of history, there are ancient artifacts that astonish not merely for their beauty or artistic value, but for the deep questions they pose about humanity's past. One such object, perhaps one of the most enigmatic maps ever discovered, is the Piri Reis map. Drawn in 1513 by the Turkish admiral and cartographer Piri Reis, this map is famous not only for its extraordinary accuracy, but also for what it depicts: coastlines that should have been impossible for people of that era to know, and it raises a profound question: might there once have existed civilizations with global exploration capabilities whose knowledge was later forgotten or deliberately concealed. Today, only a fragment of the Piri Reis map remains. Discovered in 1929 in the archives of Istanbul's Topkapi Palace. The surviving portion shows the western coasts of Africa, the eastern coast of South America, and most controversially, a part of Antarctica, with details that continue to baffle researchers. First, it must be said that in 1513 Antarctica had not yet been officially discovered. It wasn't until 1820 that European expeditions first set foot on the icy continent. Yet on the Piri Reis map, the southern region is depicted as a landmass with clearly drawn coastlines, notably free of ice. This has led to many bold theories. One researcher, Charles Hapgood, author of Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings, argued that the Piri Reis map may have been copied from much older sources, dating to a time when Antarctica was not yet covered in thick ice. Hapgood cited geological studies suggesting that parts of Antarctica's Queen Maud Land coastline may have been ice-free around 6,000 years ago, or even earlier. If this is true, then to have drawn such details, ancient seafarers or cartographers must have possessed global exploration capabilities, something that mainstream history does not yet accept. Even in the map's own notes, Piri Reis clearly states that he compiled it from very ancient source maps, including charts from the time of Alexander the Great, and even some maps copied from much earlier times. He described the process as assembling fragments of long-lost knowledge preserved through generations of mariners. Another striking detail is the map's extraordinary accuracy regarding the coasts of South America and Africa. Compared to contemporary European maps, which still contained major errors, Piri Reis's map displays coastlines with shapes and proportions remarkably close to modern standards. Many researchers argue that this level of precision could not have been achieved through mere coastal voyages and the rudimentary surveying techniques of the Middle Ages. One theory is that the original maps Piri Reis accessed may have employed advanced projection methods, something only civilizations with very high mathematical and astronomical knowledge could accomplish, and so the greatest question remains unanswered: where did those original maps come from? According to internal academic records from the Ottoman scholarly tradition, there are hints that the libraries of Constantinople, which had preserved many ancient manuscripts from the Byzantine Empire, were an important source of knowledge for Islamic scholars of the Renaissance. And Constantinople itself had once held a vast trove of Greek, Roman, Egyptian, and Phoenician documents. Independent researchers suggest that during the chaos following Constantinople's fall, some of these ancient charts and manuscripts fell into the hands of Muslim scholars, possibly including maps of lost or undiscovered continents. But which civilization originally created these source maps remains a mystery. Some theories link them to the Phoenicians, master seafarers of the ancient world. Bolder hypotheses suggest they may trace back to prehistoric civilizations unrecognized by mainstream history, possibly connected to pre-Ice Age cultures. An intriguing fact is that after the Piri Reis map became widely known, certain ancient maps once held in European collections mysteriously vanished or became difficult to access. Scholars working in the Vatican Library and old Venetian archives have reported that informal directives were issued advising against publishing maps that could reignite debates about pre-Columbian maritime history. Thus, the story of the Piri Reis map is not merely that of an ancient chart. It opens a profound doorway into questions about humanity's past, about whether globally connected civilizations may once have existed, of which we now glimpse only faint fragments. And when one gazes upon those carefully drawn lines, those ice-free Antarctic coastlines, those precise South American shores, one cannot help but ask how much knowledge of Earth's true history has been hidden, lost, or deliberately erased from the memory of humankind. Among all the stories of hidden history, there is perhaps no subject more controversial, more unsettling to mainstream academia, more quietly monitored by governments, than the possibility that humankind may have once been in contact with beings from beyond this earth. And what makes this subject so compelling is that it is not confined to conspiracy theories or works of science fiction. Over the past several decades, a vast collection of books, research papers, archival records, and even government reports on this topic have been suppressed from public release or restricted with great care. And when one traces the shadows of these suppressed materials, an astonishing picture begins to emerge. It is possible that in the distant past, many ancient civilizations may have had encounters, or at least clear traditions, regarding beings not of this earth. Let us begin with the ancient records. Across countless ancient cultures, from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and India to the civilizations of the Americas, there are recurring legends of gods who came from the sky or teachers who arrived from the stars. In ancient Mesopotamia, clay tablets such as the Enuma Elish and the Sumerian king list speak of the Anunnaki, those who from the heavens came to earth, who guided humans in building the first cities and taught them the arts of agriculture and architecture. In Egypt, inscriptions at the Temple of Edfu describe beings capable of flight, riding in celestial vehicles, who came from the land of the stars. In Indian culture, the Mahabharata and Ramayana recount in detail great battles involving Vimana, flying craft capable of traversing the atmosphere. Such stories appear with remarkable consistency around the world, to the point where many serious researchers now see them as far more than mere coincidence. What has made this subject particularly sensitive is that since the 20th century, modern authors began systematically compiling evidence, including physical artifacts, suggesting that ancient civilizations may have had contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. One of the first works to be banned or restricted in many countries was The Spaceships of Ezekiel, 1974, by NASA engineer Joseph F. Blumrich. This book carefully analyzed descriptions in the Book of Ezekiel about the Lord's chariot, arguing that the technical details align strikingly with the structure of a spacecraft equipped with rocket engines and hover systems. Then came Chariots of the Gods, first published in 1968 by Erich von Däniken. This book compiled hundreds of cases from archaeology, ancient literature, and folklore, all of which could be more plausibly explained if one assumes that humans in antiquity had contact with extraterrestrial beings. Von Däniken argued that the Egyptian pyramids, the Moai statues of Easter Island, the Nazca lines of Peru, and countless other massive structures bear marks of technology or knowledge that local civilizations of the time could not have possessed. The result was swift. Von Däniken's book was quickly banned or restricted in many Western countries, including France, Italy, and Spain, under pressure from both academic and religious authorities. In the former Soviet Union, books on this subject were classified as prohibited for public circulation, on the grounds that they could undermine belief in the intellectual superiority of socialism. And it did not stop with books. A large number of government reports on UFO, now called UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, were also classified. Reports from the US Project Blue Book and documents from the British, French, and Canadian defense ministries contained numerous cases suggesting encounters with flying objects and entities beyond the scope of known human technology. The issue grew even more sensitive when some researchers began pointing to possible evidence of extraterrestrial technology in ancient history, not merely in myth, but in physical artifacts. So-called OOPArts, out-of-place artifacts, include the Baghdad batteries, strange carvings in Abydos, Egypt, depicting objects resembling helicopters, submarines and spacecraft, crystals manufactured with techniques unknown in ancient times, all of which became topics heavily restricted in academic publishing. Many scholars attempting to publish papers on these phenomena in mainstream scientific journals were rejected outright or labeled as unscientific. In some cases, published papers were even withdrawn after external pressure from unnamed organizations. But why is this subject so tightly controlled? One obvious reason is that acknowledging ancient contact with extraterrestrial intelligence would force a complete rewrite of human history, from the origins of civilization to the development of science. Such an admission would shake the foundations of many ideological systems, historical doctrines, and the authority of certain religious and political institutions. Another factor is that certain secretive groups, including national intelligence agencies and even long-standing secret societies, may wish to control this knowledge for strategic reasons. If extraterrestrial technology truly exists, or once existed, the power to access and harness such knowledge could reshape the global balance of power. Today, even as the subject is being opened slightly, with recent releases of some US government UAP reports, deeper research into the possibility of ancient extraterrestrial contact remains largely suppressed in mainstream academia. Modern, forbidden books on this subject continue to be marginalized, never included in official history or archaeology curricula. Yet despite all efforts to conceal it, the question remains. And with every new, unexplained artifact, with each ancient text translated anew, the story of possible contact between ancient civilizations and extraterrestrial beings once again stirs humanity's deepest curiosity. Among the countless ancient legends of humanity, there is one motif that repeats itself across cultures, from east to west, the story of hidden worlds beneath the earth. The ancient Greeks spoke of Hades, the underworld. The Norse told of Svartalfheim, the realm of dwarven craftsmen dwelling deep within the mountains. In India, legends tell of Patala, a subterranean kingdom inhabited by wise beings and mysterious creatures. Yet beyond these mythic tales lies an idea that has captured human imagination for centuries, the idea that beneath the Earth's surface there may exist actual advanced civilizations thriving in vast hidden spaces yet to be discovered. This is the legend of Agartha and the theory of Hollow Earth. The concept of Agartha, sometimes written as Akata or Agartha, became more prominent in Western esoteric literature during the late 19th century, though its roots are far older. According to Tibetan and Indian traditions, Agartha is a mysterious kingdom located deep beneath the Himalayas, connected to the surface through vast networks of tunnels stretching across the world. It is believed that the inhabitants of Agartha, sometimes described as spiritual masters, sometimes as descendants of ancient civilizations, retreated underground to escape global cataclysms and humanity's endless wars. There, they continued to develop advanced knowledge and superior technology, isolated from the surface world. But how did this idea become so deeply rooted in modern consciousness? In part, it stems from the writings of explorers and mystics. In the late 19th century, French author Joseph-Alexandre Saint-Yves d'Alvedre published Mission de l'Inde on Europe, in which he described Agartha as a supreme center of wisdom, said to preserve the total knowledge of ancient humanity. Saint-Yves claimed to have made contact with representatives of this kingdom through mystical rites. Later, the Russian explorer Nicholas Roerich, who led expeditions across Central Asia, recorded similar legends heard from Tibetan lamas. In Roerich's notes, the lamas spoke of hidden gateways to the inner earth, radiant underground cities, and beings of transcendent knowledge. But perhaps what truly caused this legend to ignite in modern imagination was its association with the concept of hollow earth. The idea is not new. As early as the 17th century, astronomer Edmund Halley, famous for Halley's Comet, proposed that the Earth might contain hollow layers within it. By the 19th century, explorer John Cleves Simmes Jr. developed the hollow Earth theory further, suggesting the existence of large openings at both poles. Simmes even lobbied the US Congress to fund an expedition to the Arctic in search of an entrance to the inner Earth, though his efforts were ultimately unsuccessful. Later works such as The Smoky God by Willis George Emerson, 1908, and Etidorpa by John Uri Lloyd continued to fuel the myth of civilizations beneath the Earth's crust. Curiously, during the 20th century, certain unexplained phenomena gave further life to these theories. Many pilots flying over the North and South Poles reported anomalous optical and magnetic phenomena. Some even described seeing green lands in regions where only ice should exist. The most famous account comes from Admiral Richard E. Byrd, the American explorer who led expeditions to both the North and South Poles. In his diary, Byrd described a flight over the North Pole in 1947, during which he claimed to have seen ice-free lands, strange creatures, and artificial structures. Naturally, these reports were officially denied or classified by the US government. Byrd's full diary was never fully released, and the portions relating to this Arctic experience remain the subject of intense controversy. Today, mainstream science completely rejects the hollow Earth theory in a literal sense, citing seismic, gravitational, and magnetic evidence that does not support such a structure. But this has not stopped belief in a symbolic Agartha or even the possibility of a physical Agartha beneath geological layers still unexplored. Some modern researchers propose that even if there are no vast hollow cavities, there may well be immense natural cave systems connecting various parts of the world. Cave systems like Hang Son Doong in Vietnam, large enough to house entire forests, or the underground complexes of Cappadocia and Derinkuyu in Turkey, demonstrate that nature is fully capable of creating vast subterranean spaces. Could some of these spaces once have been used by ancient civilizations, or perhaps still be in use today? That is a question which remains unanswered. And like all great legends, it is precisely this silence, this veil, and the scattered, inexplicable clues that keep the story of Agartha and Hollow Earth alive, as an unwritten chapter in humanity's hidden history. Among the greatest mysteries of human history, one question has always puzzled scholars, engineers, and lovers of the past alike. Why do so many ancient structures, from the pyramids of Giza, the Temple of Baalbek, Machu Picchu, to megalithic astronomical observatories, exhibit such precision, durability, and harmony that even with modern technology many of their details remain impossible to fully replicate? Could it be that the ancients relied solely on experience and manual labor? Or did they possess forms of knowledge that transcended ordinary engineering, an understanding that combined physics, mathematics, astronomy, and deeper universal principles we are only beginning to rediscover? This question leads us into a very special domain, metaphysical building knowledge. Once present in ancient civilizations, now largely lost or hidden within esoteric traditions, forbidden books, and the teachings of secret societies. Let us begin with the clearest evidence, the very structures that still stand today. The Great Pyramid of Giza, with its multi-ton stone blocks fitted together with tolerances of just a few fractions of a millimeter, is not only an engineering marvel. Its orientation and form encode remarkably advanced astronomical knowledge. The three Great Pyramids are aligned precisely with Orion's belt, corresponding to the three stars of the belt, which in Egyptian belief represented the god Osiris. The angles of the pyramid faces and the ratio of height to base perimeter are directly linked to mathematical constants such as pi, and phi, the golden ratio. How the ancient Egyptians arrived at these values remains unknown. Their surviving mathematical texts offer no clear explanation. The Temple of Baalbek in Lebanon presents an even greater challenge. Its trilithon blocks, each weighing between 800 and 1,200 tons, surpass anything modern cranes can lift. These stones are not only immense but perfectly fitted upon a foundation with such precision that a razor blade cannot slip between them. At Machu Picchu and Sacsayhuaman, the Inca perfected an earthquake-resistant stone joining technique using irregularly shaped stones that fit together seamlessly without mortar. After thousands of years in one of Earth's most seismically active regions, these walls remain perfectly stable. All of these structures share a common trait. They were not built solely for practical or ceremonial purposes. Recent studies suggest that they were constructed according to principles that harmonize with the Earth's energy fields, with astronomical cycles, and perhaps even with resonant frequencies modern science is only beginning to explore. What metaphysical knowledge did the ancients apply, and why was it lost? Many independent researchers, and some scholars within esoteric circles, believe that ancient civilizations possessed integrated systems of knowledge, where mathematics, sacred geometry, acoustics, and natural energy fields were woven into the very fabric of their architectural arts. One clear example is sacred geometry. From the pyramids of Egypt to Gothic cathedrals, from Eastern mandalas to Stonehenge, patterns such as the golden ratio, the pentagram, and the Fibonacci spiral appear with astonishing consistency. These ratios are not merely aesthetic. They correspond to natural resonant frequencies, to human biofields, and to deeper physical phenomena. In Western esoteric traditions, particularly within secret societies such as the Freemasons and Rosicrucians, fragments of this knowledge have been preserved, though cloaked in symbols and cryptic language rather than transmitted as direct, technical instruction. The lost or forbidden materials of the past, particularly from the Library of Alexandria and ancient monasteries, are believed to have contained detailed manuscripts on how to calculate the intersecting energy points on Earth's surface, akin to today's concept of ley lines. Principles of acoustic resonance used to enhance the durability and spiritual effects of structures. Geometric and astronomical formulas for aligning architecture with key celestial events. How to select and apply materials according to their resonant properties. Explaining why certain stones were chosen for specific parts of pyramids and temples. Crucially, much of this knowledge is no longer taught openly. Since the Renaissance, as science separated from spirituality and intuitive wisdom, such metaphysical insights were dismissed as mysticism, no longer seen as part of legitimate architectural science. In addition, religious authorities of the past had strong motives to suppress this knowledge, especially when it stemmed from pre-Christian or Eastern traditions and was thus labeled heretical. Today, a handful of pioneering engineers and researchers are working to rediscover these lost principles. Studies of ancient acoustics in pyramid ritual chambers, analyses of sacred geometry's biological effects, and new investigations into geomagnetic wave patterns at ancient sites are revealing that the ancients may indeed have surpassed us in their ability to harmonize matter with invisible energy fields. Yet the path to fully reclaim this wisdom remains long, for the texts that once recorded it have mostly been lost, burned, or confined to forbidden archives. And until humanity is once again ready to bridge the gap between science and spirit, the secrets of metaphysical architecture may remain one of the darkest and most hidden chapters in the history of civilization. When we think of the Crusades, what comes to mind are images of Christian armies sailing east to reclaim the Holy Land, driven by religious fervor and the ambitions of Western expansion. But few know that behind the bloody battles of the Crusades ran another more secret stream, a parallel campaign rarely recorded in official histories, a vast search for ancient knowledge and the remnants of forgotten civilizations. And the most astonishing part, many of the relics the Crusaders brought back were never displayed in churches or museums. Instead, they were locked away in the most secret archives of the Vatican, accessible only to a chosen few. The first hints of this hidden campaign do not come from official historians, but from scattered records preserved in the documents of Western esoteric societies, especially certain secret branches of the Knights Templar, the most enigmatic order of the Crusades. According to internal records held by modern Templar research groups, as early as the 12th century, the Templars were engaged in far more than banking or guarding pilgrims, as the official histories would have us believe. They also conducted organized excavations beneath sacred sites in Jerusalem, most notably around the Temple Mount. Some recovered documents, translated from ancient texts once kept in Templar commanderies in France and Portugal, describe astonishing finds, stone tablets inscribed with an unknown language, possibly linked to pre-Judaic civilizations. Manuscripts containing advanced technical and astronomical knowledge far beyond what medieval Europe possessed. Symbols and tools likely connected to Eastern mystical traditions. Most intriguing of all are the records of maps and descriptions of lost ancient lands, which some researchers associate with legends of Atlantis or other prehistoric civilizations. But why were these treasures never made public? Here lies the crux of the matter. According to indirect evidence, as the Templars grew too powerful, the Vatican, pressured by the French crown and conservative forces within the Church, launched a campaign to destroy them. Yet instead of obliterating the artifacts the Templars had gathered, many were seized and quietly transferred to the Vatican's secret archives. Records from the 14th century mention clandestine transports from fallen Templar monasteries to Rome. Some of these items are believed to have been sealed within the underground vaults of the Vatican Library. Others may have fallen into the hands of esoteric societies, where they were preserved in deep secrecy. Curiously, from the 15th century onward, waves of new knowledge began to appear in Europe, from Hermetic philosophy to esoteric science and sacred geometry, the origins of which remain largely unexplained. Some scholars believe that the Templars or their allied networks quietly leaked portions of this knowledge obtained in the East and from ancient relics. But the core knowledge, the materials concerning prehistoric civilizations, architectural mastery, and metaphysical cosmology, is thought to have been locked away by the Vatican. These documents, if they exist and were made public, could fundamentally challenge the pillars of Western religious doctrine, which rests on a view of human history beginning with the biblical creation. One indirect piece of evidence is that for centuries, the Vatican has consistently refused requests to open its archives to independent scholars. Even faithful Catholic academics are granted access only to carefully curated sections. The deep archives, where materials from the Crusader campaigns may lie, remain strictly off-limits. So what did the Crusaders really bring back? We may never know for certain, but the remaining clues, from symbols in ancient Templar churches to forbidden emblems, suggest that beneath the visible Crusades ran a profound current of hidden knowledge, far richer than the official histories reveal. And until the Vatican, or someone else, unlocks the great iron doors of these forbidden vaults, this question will continue to haunt all who yearn to understand the true history of humankind. In the vast canvas of human history, the rise and fall of civilizations is often portrayed as the inevitable result of natural forces, disasters, wars, plagues. These are the causes most often cited in official records. But there is another side to this story, a darker and far more unsettling side, seldom included in mainstream education, the tale of civilizations that were not destroyed by fate, but by the deliberate will of forces lurking in the shadows. The questions beg to be asked. Why? And who wielded the blade? To find the answers, we must look deeper, into cases where the collapse of once great cultures was not the random hand of misfortune, but the outcome of carefully orchestrated plans to erase knowledge, control history, and shape global power. One of the clearest examples is the destruction of the Cathar civilization in southern France during the 13th century. The Cathars, with their simple philosophy of life, respect for spiritual freedom, and preservation of ancient religious and medical knowledge, were seen as a profound threat by the Roman Catholic Church. The Albigensian Crusade was not merely a religious war, it was a systematic campaign to obliterate an entire culture, to burn its sacred texts, to silence its teachers, and to eliminate alternative streams of thought. When the fortress of Montségur fell in 1244, not only were thousands of people burned alive, so too were countless precious manuscripts reduced to ash. Who orchestrated this? Clearly the Vatican, driven not only by the defense of doctrine, but by the deeper aim of ensuring that no stream of knowledge outside its sanctioned control could take root. Another, even more subtle, example is the near-total erasure of indigenous knowledge in Central and South America following European conquest. The Maya, Inca, and Aztec civilizations possessed advanced systems of mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and architecture. Yet after the conquests, more than 99% of their written works were destroyed, burned by Franciscan and Jesuit priests in the name of purifying heresy. Why? Because this knowledge not only clashed with Christian worldviews, it threatened the monopoly of European scholars. To control knowledge is to control power, and in many cases destroying an entire civilization was seen as the most efficient way to achieve this. Another profound example is the Harappan civilization of the Indus Valley. To this day, archaeologists remain unable to fully explain why this highly advanced urban culture vanished so completely. Unorthodox sources, including manuscripts from certain Western esoteric orders, suggest that external forces may have intervened, seeking to prevent the spread of Harappan metaphysical knowledge. Symbols found on Harappan pottery and architecture hint at an understanding of natural energies, sacred geometry, and acoustic resonance, knowledge that could have radically altered the consciousness of neighboring civilizations and even modern humanity had it survived. But who are the forces behind such schemes? Across history, a familiar pattern emerges: entities seeking to control knowledge in order to concentrate power, be they empires, religious institutions, or secretive organizations. In the Middle Ages, the Vatican was a prime actor. In more recent times, groups such as the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, and international financial elites have been accused of manipulating information, sometimes suppressing archaeological discoveries that could challenge the official historical narrative. Part of this is to safeguard existing power structures. But a deeper reason may lie in an ancient fear that if humanity were to rediscover certain forgotten metaphysical truths, the balance of power between elites and the general populace could be irreversibly upended. Thus, civilizations destroyed by design are not merely the victims of war or imperial greed. They are casualties of a centuries-long war to control humanity's collective memory. And even today, the fragments that remain, hidden manuscripts, buried artifacts, distorted legends, still whisper stories not yet fully told. Stories of a history that perhaps we are still not permitted to fully know. There is a truth that many scholars privately acknowledge, yet few dare to discuss openly. Within humanity's vast body of knowledge there exist forbidden books. Not because they are baseless nor unscientific, but because they contain warnings too unsettling for the powers that be. When these warnings are peeled away, they reveal a chilling message: that history itself moves in inescapable cycles of rise and fall, light and shadow, wisdom and ignorance, repeating endlessly as though humanity is trapped within a hidden wheel few are conscious enough to perceive. And strikingly, in ancient forbidden texts, from Gnostic writings, Hermetic manuscripts, to the works of philosophers cast out from mainstream thought, these warnings were clearly written. A classic example appears in the Corpus Hermeticum, the collection of mystical writings from the Greco-Egyptian world. In the prophecy of Hermes we read, "There shall come a time when men will forget their divine origin. Only the outward appearances of knowledge shall be honored, while true wisdom is buried. Temples will be built without understanding of the divine. Science shall progress, yet lack wisdom, and the world will spiral toward destruction through its own arrogance." That warning echoes as though spoken for our own age. In the forbidden Gnostic texts, banned by the Church for millennia, there exists the concept of the archons, symbolic entities representing forces that manipulate human consciousness, causing humanity to forget its true nature and become trapped in the cycles of material history. According to these texts, when humans become too enthralled with technology, too fragmented in their understanding, and too obsessed with hollow wars of ideology, that is when the cycle resets. A brilliant civilization can collapse, not from lack of technology, but from losing the harmony between knowledge and spirit. Even within the Hermetic manuscripts there are passages describing that prior civilizations, unnamed, had fallen into precisely this trap. They achieved remarkable technological mastery, yet created tools of destruction beyond their control. When the balance was broken, nature itself, described as a deeper intelligence, restored order through catastrophe. Are we now repeating that same history? Signs are everywhere. As artificial intelligence, bioweapons, and mind control technologies advance toward unprecedented heights, we also see a simultaneous erosion of human values, inner knowledge, and genuine human connection. Notably, certain forbidden texts of the Middle Ages warned that every period of extreme technological brilliance carries the risk of deep societal imbalance. When humankind believes it can replace the divine or nature with machines and pure logic, that is the moment when collapse begins silently. Another profound example lies within ancient alchemical writings. The alchemists were not merely seeking gold, they embedded deep philosophy about the life cycle of civilizations. According to their teachings, any civilization passes through the phases of nigredo, darkness, albedo, rebirth, and rubedo, completion. But when this natural process is forcibly halted, when power structures seek to freeze a civilization in the rubedo phase through control or violence, decay inevitably follows. In our modern world, with global networks of information control, cultural homogenization, and resource dominance on a scale never before seen, we are in danger of falling into exactly that trap. Modern forbidden literature, from studies on thought control technologies to reports on the risks of runaway AI, show that the cycle is closing faster than ever. Yet, like the Gnostic manuscripts of old, these warnings are kept on the fringes, excluded from mainstream discourse. Perhaps the bitterest truth is this: prior civilizations, Atlantis, if it truly existed, Sumer, ancient Egypt, the Maya, all seem to have followed these same paths. Their remaining ruins, inscriptions, and oral legends all whisper of golden ages lost, swept away by human arrogance and imbalance. Are we destined to repeat their fate? As the ancient Hermetic sages said, the answer depends entirely on whether we can learn the lesson. But to learn, we must be free to access the knowledge, including that which is now forbidden or distorted. And perhaps in this turbulent age, seeking out the warnings contained in forbidden books and listening to the wisdom of the past may be our last chance to break free from the harsh cycle that human history seems unable to escape. Perhaps the greatest danger is not when a civilization collapses, Wes, but when its memory is erased from our collective consciousness. For when memory is lost, so too are the lessons. And when the lessons are gone, the cycle of history is given the chance to begin once more. The stories we have explored together of buried civilizations, forbidden books burned, hidden knowledge sealed away, and warnings deliberately obscured, these are not mere fragments of some distant past. They stand as reminders that history, no matter how distorted or concealed, remains alive. It whispers through folk legends, through symbols etched into ancient stone walls, through manuscripts preserved in silent lineages. And above all, it lives in how we remember, how we retell, and how we act today. For each time someone asks, what lies beyond the official version of truth? That is a moment when a small part of history's hidden light is rekindled. Each time a person reads a forbidden text, explores a forgotten civilization, or sits quietly before an ancient ruin, not hurriedly snapping a photo for the internet, but truly listening to the stones, the winds, the echoes of memory. In that moment, the great wheel of ignorance slows, if only a little. But this is no easy task, for the forces that seek to control memory remain strong. They shape our education systems, dominate the media, and even influence the way we think about what history is meant to be. They would have us believe that stories outside the mainstream are mere conspiracies, that ancient knowledge is mere myth, and that nothing exists beyond the polished surface of the officially approved historical narrative. Yet you and I, having journeyed this far together, can sense a deeper truth. There are too many puzzle pieces that do not fit within the story we were taught. Too many traces have been deliberately obscured. Too many warnings have been quietly ignored. And if we do not choose to speak of these stories, they may truly vanish. But history does not die, as long as there are those willing to tell it, those willing to listen, and those willing to question. So when you turn off this video, take a moment to look again at those old maps, those ancient statues, those faded pages you may have once glanced at without a second thought. Perhaps some small symbol, some forgotten mark, might lead you toward a new path of discovery. And when someone tells you that history has only one version, smile. Because after this journey, you now know history is always layered, multidimensional, and alive in hidden currents, waiting for those who truly listen. If you find these kinds of topics worth reflecting on, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to read your insights and questions, for it is those very questions that keep this conversation alive. And if you wish to continue exploring these forgotten corners of our past, feel free to subscribe to the channel. There are many more deep, thought-provoking stories still waiting to be told, because history does not die. It waits for someone to bring its light forth once more. And perhaps that someone is you.